as we embark upon Chapter 10, learning about continental Western Europe. The beauty of this space is, well, it's ancient and modern. Similar to Northern Europe, you're going to find things that just speak to all of your senses, from natural, beautiful, lush land to then cities filled with ancient and modern, all merged into one. One of the unique things that you'll find in the largest country in continental Western Europe is France. And in France, there's something called the cafe culture. On corner after corner, you're gonna find cafes, sometimes 1, 2, or even 4 cafes located on one corner, with people sitting having a pint of beer, a glass of wine, an amazing cafe con leche, or cafe au latte, oh my goodness, which just means coffee with milk, or delicious foods and tremendously decadent baked goods. The cafe culture in France is, well, many people go to France just to experience sitting on a corner, listening to the music and the hustle and the bustle of the beauty, and watching people as they travel by. The culture of cafes in France is maybe on a bucket list. I would encourage it to be on a bucket list for everybody in life. So when we look at the physical geography of this area of continental Europe, we're going to see some main areas, but what I want you to take note is that it is called the Peninsula of Peninsulas. So if you look at this image, you can see it is a peninsula, and there's a peninsula, and then another little peninsula, and a peninsula. Well, and this, that Europe itself is called, this is the Peninsula of Peninsulas, but that this area is called the Peninsula of Peninsulas. Italy has a peninsula. There's just peninsulas all over. And a couple features in this continental, though, if we zoomed in here, we would find the continental Western Europe. Some key features we want to notate or pay attention to are the Western uplands. And in the Western uplands, we have this peninsula called the Brittany Peninsula. This is France. Let's go back, actually. France. I tried to darken some of the lines. I'm going to use a pen. France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Austria. Those are the main countries: France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. The main cities that you're going to find, that there's many cities, but a couple of the key ones that you want to take note of are Paris, France. It's a big deal. And Vienna in Austria. This area is really known for, as you can just see by the topography, the lowlands are green, and those are called the lowlands, or the European plain, the Great European Plain. So the lowlands are the Great European Plain, and that covers the northern half of Germany and France. Over here are western uplands, and I highlighted here, but there's a little bit of topography that shows us there's some highlands. Essentially, there's some hills or cliffs that face north towards the English Channel. The Great Pyrenees Mountains, or the Pyrenees Mountains, act as this divide between France and Spain. And then all of us have heard at some point about the Alps. Now, typically, people will say the Swiss Alps. Have you heard that more? But no, it's not just the Swiss Alps. There's the Italian Alps, the Austrian Alps, the French Alps. Really, it's just a mountain range of Alps that go across. And we actually call them the Western, Central, and Eastern Alps. Western, Central, and Eastern Alps. And that's just this large chain of mountains that spread throughout. You can see here that Africa pushed up, the African tectonic plate pushed up, the European tectonic plate pushed down, and they created what we know of as the Alps in Europe. And the Alps are the principal mountains in this area. They're the largest most well-renowned and absolutely breathtaking. I want to take note too, Brittany holds not Brittany, where is it? The Central Uplands. Let me go back here. Okay, so this is the Great European Plain up north. We have the Western Uplands, and then these are the Central Uplands. The Central Uplands hold the Ardennes Mountains, and they are right here. And then we have the Alps, or the Alpine system. So the Ardennes, or the Central Uplands, are this larger section of highlands and rolling hills and beauty. And then there's the jagged Alps that just jet forth out of the ground and create this beautiful mountain system. And the Great Plain is the geographical superhighway of Europe. So this just is a space where can we travel easier over mountains or over plains? We travel easier over the plains. Yep, and okay, so a couple beautiful images. This is a cave in France, and what you'll notice how beautiful these are, that you see stalactites that hold tight to the ceiling and stalagmites that grow out of the ground. There's breathtaking features all throughout Europe, including gorgeous gorges, that's funny, and lush greenery, windmills, the use of mountains with beautiful alpine lakes next to them. It's just a stunning and beautiful area. One of the most important things, though, too, to take note is bodies of water surround, many of the seas surround this area. So it has less access to oceans and access to seas, in fact. So with that said, the rivers are very important. They're important for trade, for transportation, agriculture, and production. Rightfully so. If these countries, we need an easy way to move agriculture and goods, and rivers are key for that. A couple key rivers we want to remember about. The Danube, Danube, is the second longest river in Europe and is classified as an international waterway. Okay, so the Danube is a large river. There's other rivers like the Elbe and the Rhine River that goes through Germany. But another one that I want to take note is the Loire. It is the longest river, and it is in France, or the longest river in France. The Rhine River is an industrial, my goodness, I can't read. Megalopolis, my goodness. And the Ruhr, R-U-H-R, is the largest industrial region in Europe. R-U-H-R is the largest industrial region in Europe. The Seine River is known as the River of Paris. And this is a picture of the Seine River, and it flows through the center of Paris. So rivers are important for trade. The Danube is the second longest, and the Seine River flows through Paris. It's important to note too, take note, just like Northern Europe, this area has a warm westerly wind that brings in water and winds that creates a marine west coast climate. So it keeps this area warmer than it naturally would want to be because of that wonderful, the trade winds, or the westerly winds, and water flow. So one of the things that's also beautiful about this area is agriculture. The nations have significant amounts of arable land, so they get to grow things and have excellent produce and production of coal and hydroelectric, as well as agriculture. This is a page that is full of information. Human geography for Central Europe, Western Europe, has a lot of information. So I highly recommend you to read and highlight it and completely read this page. Maybe read these two pages and read them twice. But a couple things that we want to take note is something called the EU, the European Union, and it is a single bureaucracy called the European Union. So most of Western Europe was once ruled by absolute monarchs, but have somewhat moved into this bureaucracy called the EU. We're going to learn a lot about it over here. When World War II came to an end, Western and Eastern Germany were divided. Europe was divided down the center, and Western and Eastern Germany were divided. Western Germany utilized free market and ideas. It had natural waterways and ports, and it faced an economic miracle that after such devastation, they started to grow and come back. Whereas Eastern Germany fell further behind. It had a communist government. They created a Berlin Wall that created a division between the two countries, and protesters joined. It weakened the government and weakened the country until 1989. Later, finally resigned, and the Berlin Wall fell. So, as we move into Europe, it says our text says that there's 28 countries as of 2019. But since then, Great Britain officially has left the EU, and that was called Brexit. So there are 27 countries in the European Union. Let me read this word. Maastricht Treaty in 1992 is when the EU was created. So Maastricht Treaty created the EU. Essentially what it is it's a group of countries, 27 countries, that have come together to try to counterbalance the United States. They're kind of trying to act in many ways to have this common euro currency, have a common ground, and act kind of like these united countries come together like the United States. But the uniqueness is they are individual countries. They all have different languages and culture, and so it can be quite tricky. It also has lots of bureaucracy. The EU enforces regulations that can be very burdensome to individuals and businesses. So there's extensive rules that regulate everything from the quality of your fruits and vegetables to how much electricity an appliance can use. So there's lots of control. The EU does not have a military. So the EU does not have its own military, but has individual nations help defend its area, the land. And then NATO's defense alliance was founded after World War II to counteract or to come against the Soviet Union. These little asterisks are points of importance to remember. This page is packed. Switzerland stands alone. This is something interesting to know. Switzerland stands alone in comparison to the EU and NATO because in 1515, so a long time, it decided that it was not going to join all the wars that were surrounding it, and it has stayed neutral. When we jump over here to our geography or topography of the land, we're going to learn that Switzerland is actually surrounded by the Alps and has a geographical advantage to not be invaded quite as easily as some of these other countries because it's in the Alps and they have geographical advantage for their protection and individualism, specifically their neutrality. That's probably the better word to say. They're neutral. Cantons, the federal divisions of Switzerland. Okay, canton is the division of the country and united under the Federal Republic. So it was when Switzerland was divided federally. Okay, that's important to know as well. Here's the page that I missed. So the Swiss people take advantage of the mountains for their defense, and so that keeps them safe. Now, Germany is the largest economy. It has the most diverse economy, and it is the powerhouse. Yet there are some uniquenesses. France has the most visited country in the whole wide world. And Switzerland, because of its banking and its tourism and such, it has the strongest economy. But don't make sure to take note. Germany is the largest economy in this portion in Central Europe. Demographics. Now, one thing that's interesting is they have the birth rate has declined over the years. So Europe has low birth rates, while France protects moms and has options for working mothers. Really, what you see in Europe is the birth rate is not growing. In Germany, it's at like 1.5, and it needs to be at 1.2 to replace itself. So France's birth rate is steady, but it's steady mostly because they benefit working mothers. Everywhere else throughout Europe or Central Europe, the birth rate is declining. A couple other notes that we want to take here, or just interest to take note of, is there are things called Islamic extremists that would, refugees from North Africa and the Middle East flooded into Europe and flooded into Germany. And some of the things that we can take note of is there's people focusing to seek help from Islamic extremists fleeing to Europe for asylum, and then also for economic reasons. They were immigrants to seek financial help, and then those that were seeking asylum or protection. What happened, though, in many cases is they say, we can manage this. And that was this slogan that they created throughout portions of Europe. But what ended up happening is in many places from year to year, the Europeans' feelings changed as the flood of different cultures dramatically shifted, and lots of people ended up, there's more bombings, more terrorism, more abuse. And so Europe is saying, many of these countries are saying, we've got to find ways to bring a balance to the refugee and to those that are seeking and needing asylum throughout the world. Couple other notes that we want to take is the people of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland are the epitome of what we call the low context culture. So far we've learned about like this mixed context, or we've even learned about high context, where maybe they're late and they're creative and they're loud and there's lots of emotion. Well, in this area, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland are what we call low context. So let me highlight some features here. Punctuality is important. So much so that German and Swiss watches are known for their precision clocks and watches. So this country, this area, like being timely, being on time is important. Which country has, one of the countries has, in case of an emergency, they can actually prepare and shelter Swiss. The Swiss people has space for 114% of their population to be protected and safe if there was a nuclear war. Holy cow. There's excellence in their manufactured goods. And if you've ever thought of just some of these products that come from these countries that we know of, like Swiss watches and German cars, we know that they're built with absolute excellence and durable and long lasting. France sits between Spain and Germany, so it kind of finds this balance between that high context, between this high context culture of Spain and the low context culture of Germany. Now, if we can talk about some of my favorite things about this area, Central Europe is known for their expertise in baking. If you want the yummiest baked goods in the whole wide world, just head on over to France. But also, Germany and Luxembourg are known for just these delicious foods, and it's not just France, this whole region. So people create anything from croissants to pumpernickel bread to raisin breads and just delicious foods. So when you think of this area, think of these beautiful chefs. France specifically is known as the what did they say? Well, it's just the French cuisine is known as one of the most wonderful foods in the world, but in this case, it's an art form, and the text calls it an art form, and that is very true. Like, cooking is not just throwing together some food that fills your body. In France, it's an art form, and it is treated as such. Speaking about art, Vienna and in Austria is known as the capital classic music of the world, or the capital of classic music, since it's the home of Mozart, Johann Strauss, and Franz Schubert. So when we think of Vienna, Austria, think of the most wonderful classical music. Was and is known as the capital of the world. So a couple other little things we want to hit on. when we come into religion, one of the heartbreaking pieces, really about the whole wide world, is while we talk about the religion as the backbone in many of these countries, the reality is they're oftentimes devoid of relationship with the Lord. And that has happened throughout most of Europe, but specifically in many ways, they are practical atheists, that they don't believe in God. Yet France and Austria has remained Roman Catholic. So France and Austria has remained Roman Catholic, while Germany and other countries throughout Central Europe were homes of Martin Luther and the Reformation, which brought to us the Protestant faith. Okay. One little key to take note on is the difference between atheism and agnosticism. They sound similar, and in many ways are, but atheism specifically says that God does not exist, where an agnostic says they're not sure, they're not able to know if God exists. So agnostic would say that you're unable to know if God exists, and an atheist says that God absolutely does not exist. One of the heartbreaking pieces that is very real throughout Europe and has marked Germany and France, all of Central Europe, especially during World War II, this was the birthplace and the birthplace of something we know of as the Holocaust. And during World War II, Nazis and Hitler rose to power and really had lots of purposes, but one was to exterminate, remove the Jewish people from the world. And a heartbreaking stat is that there was 9.5 million Jews living in Europe before World War II. And after World War II, there was 3.8 million. So just mathematically speaking, I'll move this up. I did a little research additionally and found out that maybe-ish 150,000 people fled, Jewish people fled and left that area. But really we have about 5,550,000 people that were murdered and killed in the genocide that we know of as the Holocaust. Not to be Debbie Downer for you, but just for us to understand that it was almost 10 million people that were once in Germany, and that were Jewish people that were once in Central Europe, and that many millions were murdered during the Holocaust. This is a picture of Notre Dame. I completely brain spaced for a second. The text says that at one point they wanted to replace Notre Dame with maybe some different, it had lost its religious symbol, but it was more of a cultural symbol, and that maybe wanted to put a greenhouse on top. I had the privilege of seeing Notre Dame mostly fixed up, and you're able to actually finally enter Notre Dame after years after the fire. And they worked very hard, tirelessly, to honor the tradition and the beauty that was. And so Notre Dame looked like this back in 2010, when it was the fire. The fire was in 2019. So in early 2019, this fire happened in April of 2019. And now 6 years later, it is almost completely restored, and it is beautiful. Because of one of the things with France that you'll note is they have they have a desire for French culture over religion or over religion or different people groups. Like, they won't do a census to get an idea of the demographics. Instead, they want everybody to have a French culture, and there's lots of acceptance. Lots of welcoming of different cultures, and the Muslim culture has really invaded or found home in France and in Paris, and it has the greatest population or percentage of Muslims. France does. It is growing and continuing to grow, and one of the things they're hoping to create is a French Islam. So the French are trying to create a French Islam rather than Islam, which is in France. So those are a couple key features and key facts that we want to talk about on religion. The people and interactions of people and places throughout Central Europe. One thing that's really, Western Europe is probably the most environmentally conscious region in the world. They care about and are mindful of and wise with environmental conservation. I'm not going to try to read that word, but essentially passive houses, passive in Germany. These passive houses are buildings that use very little energy from power plants and are almost totally self-sufficient. So homes that bring in energy from the sun, maybe thermal energy, solar energy, and they cost a lot to build. The upfront construction costs are enormous, but it suits the culture since there is not a lot of mobility, as well as they are not as mobile as other countries. Specifically though, these little passive houses, they're passive houses because if you can think about it, the electricity just from the power plant passes right by. In Switzerland, instead of just having a garbage can out and maybe having it a quarter full, what they do is they only pay for garbage that's actually collected. So that also incentivizes, if I have one garbage bag out, I'm going to pay for it, but I have 10, I'm going to pay for that. So it incentivizes less waste. Throughout France, they have a campaign to use food waste by discounting maybe the ugly produce. So in America, one of the heartbreaking things is we're pretty picky. We want a tomato to look beautiful. Well, what about the tomatoes that have a funky button on them? Or if you've grown anything in your garden, you know that sometimes carrots come out looking like funny humans, right? Or crazy things. They've got like all these tendrils, produce does not always look as beautiful as we Americans expect it to look because of how our culture expects the food to look. But if food is a little bruised or a little funky looking or a little unique, in France, they actually just discount it and really incentivize people to get carrots, or those are beautiful looking carrots. I've had some carrots that looked quite hilarious. And so they incentivize different types of produce. Those are a couple things that this area does, as well as the Netherlands. They love bikes. In the Netherlands, bikes are the most popular form. There are more bikes than people, and they are essential to the infrastructure. Almost 70% of the travel in the cities are done on bicycles. Okay. Important information to look on and read about on Dutch dikes and interactions with the environment. We can take note that water, air pollution, acid rain can be a big issue, but air pollution is really mostly caused by diesel burning fuel cars that have diesel. So one of the things that Paris has done is they have created a ban on certain days for private vehicles throughout France. This area continues to find unique and creative ways to minimize environmental negative interactions and create a sustainable and healthy life for air, water, and land, and the people that live in Western Continental Europe. There's some good questions to ask yourself here, but as we finish with understanding of the beautiful area that is continental Western Europe, I just encourage you to think about things that you love of this area. Maybe the favorite foods, maybe movies or experiences that you've had. Which kind of country would you want to live in a high context or a low context, or maybe a mixed context country? Are there any areas? Do you want to climb the Swiss Alps or excuse me, not the Swiss Alps? Would you want to climb the Western, Central, or Eastern Alps, or explore some beautiful gorges within France? And just take note of the uniqueness again of these lowlands, the uplands, and then the mountain ranges throughout Europe. It's a beautiful place. It's full of history, both ancient and modern, and And it's a wonderful place to explore and a really delicious place to eat.